In the dusty, bustling heart of 19th-century Cairo, where the Nile's gentle ripples caught the glow of lanterns at dusk, life unfolded in a maze of narrow alleys and crowded bazaars. The city was a tapestry of contrasts. Grand mosques with soaring minarets stood alongside crumbling mud-brick homes, and merchants hawking silks shared streets with barefoot children chasing stray cats. Amid this vibrant chaos, a quieter, more insidious force wove its way through the lives of Cairo's poorest souls, Hashish, a substance that promised escape but often tightened the grip of poverty. Picture a man named Mustafa, a wiry figure with calloused hands, living in a single-room dwelling in the Bulaq district. Mustafa wasn't always poor. Once, he'd been a porter, carrying sacks of grain from the Nile's docks to the market, earning just enough to feed his wife, Fatima, and their two small children. But the 19th century was unkind to men like Mustafa. Cairo, under Ottoman rule and later Muhammad Ali's modernizing ambitions, was changing. The cotton boom enriched elites, while taxes and conscription squeezed the fellahin, peasants and laborers like Mustafa. Work grew scarce as European goods flooded markets, undercutting local artisans. One evening, after a day of finding no work, Mustafa sat in a dimly lit coffee house, the air thick with the sweet, musky scent of hashish. These coffee houses, scattered across Cairo, were more than places to sip bitter coffee or play backgammon. They were refuges for the weary, where men gathered to forget their troubles. Hashish, derived from the cannabis plant, was cheap and plentiful, smuggled from the Levant or grown in Egypt's rural fringes. For a few copper coins, Mustafa could buy a pipeful, enough to dull the ache of hunger and the sting of failure. At first, hashish was a rare indulgence. Mustafa would take a puff, and the world softened. The clamor of the souk faded, his worries dissolved, and for a fleeting hour, he felt like a king in his own mind. But the spiral began subtly. One pipe became two, then a daily ritual. The coins he earned, when he earned any, went to the hashish seller instead of to Fatima for bread or lentils. His strength waned, hashish dulled his appetite, and malnutrition crept in. Work as a porter demanded vigor, but Mustafa's limbs grew sluggish, his eyes glassy. Employers turned him away, favoring men who could still have to sack without trembling. In Cairo's poor quarters, Mustafa's story wasn't unique. Hashish use was woven into the fabric of life for many. It wasn't just the laborers, boatmen, street vendors, even some women in the privacy of their homes turned to it. The drug was no secret, sold openly in markets, its use debated by religious scholars. Some clerics condemned it as haram, a sin that clouded the mind and distracted from prayer. Others shrugged, seeing it as less harmful than wine, which was rarer in Cairo anyway. The government, under Muhammad Ali and his successors, occasionally cracked down on hashish dens, but enforcement was lax. The state's focus was on taxing opium and controlling the lucrative trade routes, leaving hashish to flourish in the shadows. For the poor, hashish was both a symptom and a cause of their plight. Poverty drove them to it. Long hours of backbreaking work, or no work at all, left men like Mustafa desperate for relief. Yet the drug deepened their poverty. A man who spent his last piastre on hashish couldn't buy food or pay rent. Families went hungry, debts mounted, and children were sent to beg in the streets. In Bulaq or Old Cairo, you'd see them, hollow-cheeked boys and girls weaving through crowds, pleading for a crust of bread while their parents sat in a haze, lost to the world. Fatima, Mustafa's wife, fought to keep the family afloat. She took in sewing, mending robes for wealthier households, but the pay was meager. She'd scold Mustafa, her voice sharp with frustration, but his promises to stop rang hollow. The hashish dens were everywhere, their pull stronger than willpower. Some nights, Mustafa wouldn't come home at all, lost in a coffee house or sprawled in an alley, dreaming of a life he'd never reclaim. Cairo's rulers weren't blind to the problem, but their solutions were half-hearted. Muhammad Ali, the ambitious governor who sought to modernize Egypt, focused on building factories and canals, not uplifting the poor. His successors, like Said and Ismail, dreamed of a European-style Cairo with wide boulevards, but the slums remained untouched. Hashish was a low priority when rebellion or debt to European bankers loomed larger. Meanwhile, the British, creeping into Egypt's affairs by the late 19th century, saw the drug trade as a colonial issue elsewhere, like opium in India, but paid little mind to Cairo's hashish epidemic. The spiral of hashish and poverty wasn't just personal, it was social. Communities frayed as men abandoned their roles as providers. Women like Fatima bore the burden, working tirelessly while resentment grew. Children, deprived of schooling or stability, fell into the same cycle, begging, petty theft, or later, the same coffeehouse haze. Yet life in Cairo went on. The call to prayer echoed 5 times a day, merchants haggled in the Khan el-Khalili, and the Nile flowed as it always had. Mustafa's story doesn't end neatly. Some men broke free, finding work or faith to anchor them. Others sank deeper, their families scattered to the winds. Hashish wasn't the only villain. Poverty, neglect, and a changing world bore equal blame. But in the quiet of a Cairo night, as the city settled and the stars peeked through the dust, the scent of hashish lingered, a reminder of dreams bought cheaply and lives spent dearly. The Cairo sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and indigo. In the labyrinthine alleys of Bulak, where the air carried the mingled scents of baked bread, river mud, and the faint sweetness of hashish, life moved at its relentless pace. Donkeys plodded through the dust, laden with baskets of dates or charcoal, while women balanced clay jugs on their heads, their voices rising in soft chatter. For Mustafa and Fatima, though, the rhythm of the city felt like a weight, pressing harder each day. Mustafa had once been a man of quiet pride. His shoulders, broad from years of hauling grain sacks, had earned him respect among the dockworkers. He'd come home to Fatima with a few piastres, enough for a meal of full medams and a bit of laughter with their children, Amina and Hassan. But that was before the world seemed to shift under his feet. The 1840s had brought change to Cairo. Muhammad Ali's reforms, meant to modernize Egypt, had reshaped the city's economy. Cotton exports soared, but the wealth flowed upward, to pashas and foreign traders. For men like Mustafa, the docks grew quieter as steamships replaced traditional boats, and taxes bit deeper into their meager earnings. The coffee house became Mustafa's refuge, a low-ceilinged room where oil lamps cast flickering shadows on mud-plastered walls. Here, men like him, porters, carpenters, street sweepers, gathered to share stories and escape. The hashish pipe, passed from hand to hand, offered a fleeting release. Its smoke curled upward, carrying away thoughts of unpaid debts or a landlord's threats. Mustafa would sit cross-legged on a worn mat, his eyes half closed, as the drug dulled the ache in his bones and the gnaw of hunger. He'd dream of a different life, a small plot of land, perhaps, or a shop in the souk where he could sell spices. But morning always came, and with it, reality. Fatima, meanwhile, fought to hold their world together. Their home was a single room, its walls cracked and its floor bare earth, shared with a straw mat and a few pots. She rose before dawn, her fingers nimble as she stitched robes for a merchant's wife in the wealthier district of Azbakia. The work paid little, a handful of copper coins for hours of labor, but it kept Amina and Hassan fed, if only on flatbread and watery soup. Fatima's dark eyes, once bright with hope, now carried a quiet exhaustion. She'd watch Mustafa stumble home, his breath heavy with hashish, and her words would sharpen. "You spend our lives on smoke," she'd say, her voice low to spare the children. Mustafa would mumble apologies, promising to stop, but the next day, he'd be back in the coffee house, chasing the haze. The spiral tightened slowly, almost imperceptibly. Hashish was cheap, cheaper than wine, which was scarce and frowned upon in Muslim Cairo. A small lump of the sticky resin, bought from a vendor in the market, could last a man days if he was careful. But Mustafa wasn't careful. His earnings, when he found work, vanished into the hands of the hashish seller, a wiry man with a sly smile who lingered near the mosque of Al-Muayyad. The drug sapped Mustafa's strength, leaving him listless. His hands shook when he tried to lift a sack, and his temper flared at small frustrations. Once, he'd been known for his steady grip. Now, younger men pushed past him for jobs at the docks. In the streets of Bialak, Mustafa's story echoed in countless others. The coffee houses were filled with men like him, their faces etched with the same weariness. Hashish wasn't new to Cairo. Its use stretched back centuries, brought by traders from Syria and beyond. In the 19th century, though, it found fertile ground among the poor. Economic pressures mounted as Egypt's rulers borrowed heavily from European banks, driving up taxes and conscripting men into the army or labor gangs for canal projects. Those left behind, like Mustafa, faced a city where survival demanded cunning or endurance, and hashish offered a cheaper escape than either. The drug wasn't just a personal vice, it unraveled families. Amina, at 8 years old, had taken to roaming the streets, begging for scraps near the spice market. Her small hands clutched a tattered basket, her voice soft but persistent as she approached passers-by. Hassan, barely 6, trailed her, his bare feet caked with dust. Fatima hated sending them out, but the alternative was starvation. She'd heard stories of other children, lured into theft or worse by older boys who worked for shadowy figures in the souk. She prayed nightly, her forehead pressed to the mat, that her children would stay safe. The hashish trade thrived in Cairo's underbelly. Merchants sold it openly in the markets, alongside tobacco and coffee beans. Coffee house keepers, keen to draw customers, kept pipes ready, knowing a man might spend his last coin for a puff. The government's response was inconsistent. Muhammad Ali, who died in 1849, had focused on opium, taxing its trade to fill state coffers. Hashish, less lucrative, slipped through the cracks. His successors, Said and later Ismail, were preoccupied with grand projects, railways, operas, a Suez Canal that would link Egypt to the world. The slums of Bialak or Bab al-Sharia, where hashish dens multiplied, were afterthoughts. Occasional raids shut down a den or two, but new ones sprouted like weeds. Religious scholars debated hashish's place in a pious life. Some, citing its mind-altering effects, declared it haram, a barrier to the clarity needed for prayer. Others, noting its absence from the Quran's explicit bans, tolerated it, especially when compared to alcohol. For the poor, these debates were distant noise. Hashish was a solace, not a sin, and the coffee house was their mosque of forgetfulness. As months turned to years, Mustafa's decline steepened. His body, once sturdy, grew gaunt, his ribs visible beneath his tattered galabeah. Fatima's sewing couldn't keep up with the debts. The landlord, a stern man with a ledger always at hand, began to mutter about eviction. Fatima took on more work, her fingers bleeding from the needle, but it wasn't enough. One night, in a rare moment of clarity, Mustafa looked at his children, their faces thin and eyes wide, and wept. "I'll stop," he told Fatima, his voice breaking. She nodded, wanting to believe him, but her heart was heavy with doubt. The community around them frayed too. Neighbors, once quick to share a bowl of koshari or a kind word, grew wary. Hashish made men unreliable. Fathers missed work, sons turned to petty crime, and trust eroded. Women like Fatima formed quiet alliances, trading tips on where to find work or how to stretch a meal. But the weight of poverty and addiction pressed down, and some families broke apart entirely. A woman down the alley, widowed and desperate, had sold her daughter to a wealthy household as a servant. The rumor spread, chilling Fatima's blood. She held Amina and Hassan closer at night, whispering stories of the Nile's magic to keep their spirits alive. Cairo itself seemed indifferent to their plight. The city grew grander in parts. Ismail's new boulevards gleamed, and foreign visitors marveled at the opera house. But in Bulaq, the alleys remained dark, the air thick with dust and despair. The British, now casting a long shadow over Egypt, cared little for the hashish dens. Their eyes were on the Suez Canal and Egypt's debts, not the men wasting away in coffee houses. The spiral of hashish and poverty turned relentlessly, claiming lives one pipe at a time. One evening, as the muezzin's call drifted over the rooftops, Mustafa sat outside. As the first light of dawn crept over the minarets of Cairo, filtering through the cracks in Mustafa and Fatima's humble door, the family stirred to another day in the grip of uncertainty. Mustafa, his resolve from the previous night still flickering like a dying lamp, rose with a determination he hadn't felt in months. He washed his face in a basin of murky water drawn from the Nile, the coolness sharpening his senses. "Today," he whispered to himself, "I'll seek work at the cotton warehouses." Fatima watched him quietly, her heart a mix of skepticism and fragile optimism. She handed him a piece of stale bread, saved from the children's portion, and murmured a prayer for strength. The streets of Bulaq were already alive with the hum of early risers. Vendors set up carts laden with figs and onions, their calls blending with the distant bray of donkeys. Mustafa walked with purpose, his steps firmer than they'd been in weeks. He avoided the alley leading to his favored coffee house, where the familiar scent of hashish might tempt him. Instead, he headed toward the riverfront, where the warehouses loomed like silent giants, stacked high with bales of cotton destined for European mills. Egypt's cotton trade was booming in the 1850s, fueled by the American Civil War's disruption of supplies, but the riches rarely trickled down to laborers like Mustafa. Still, on a good day, a man could earn a few piastres heaving bales onto barges. At the docks, Mustafa joined a cluster of men, their faces weathered and hopeful. The overseer, a burly Turk with a whip coiled at his belt, scanned the group. "You there," he barked, pointing to a few sturdy youths. Mustafa stepped forward, but the overseer shook his head. "Not you, your eyes are dull, your arms weak. Come back when you're fit." The rejection stung like a scorpion's tail. Mustafa lingered, pleading for a chance, but the overseer waved him away. Defeated, he wandered the docks, watching the Nile's brown waters carry boats laden with goods. The temptation gnawed at him. The coffee house was just a short walk away, its haze promising oblivion. Back home, Fatima labored over her sewing, her needle darting in and out of fabric like a tireless bird. Amina and Hassan played quietly in the corner, stacking pebbles into makeshift towers. Fatima's thoughts drifted to her own youth, in a village upstream where life had been simpler, fields of wheat, communal ovens, and evenings of storytelling under the stars. Cairo had promised opportunity when she and Mustafa arrived years ago, but the city had swallowed them whole. Poverty here was a living thing, creeping into every crevice, amplified by the hashish that turned men into ghosts of themselves. As midday heat blanketed the city, Mustafa returned empty-handed. Fatima saw the defeat in his slumped shoulders and braced herself. "No work," he muttered, collapsing onto the mat. The silence stretched, broken only by the children's whispers. Fatima set aside her work and knelt beside him. "We can't go on like this," she said softly. "The children need more than bread and dreams." Mustafa nodded, his eyes avoiding hers. That afternoon, he slipped out again, telling Fatima he was visiting a cousin for leads on work. But his feet led him to the coffee house, where the pipe waited like an old friend. The den was dim, filled with the low murmur of conversations and the bubble of water pipes. Men reclined on cushions, their faces relaxed in the hashish's embrace. Mustafa took his place, the first puff easing the knot in his chest. Hours blurred into a fog, and when he stumbled home at dusk, Fatima's anger flared. Again, she hissed, her voice low but fierce. The children huddled in the corner, pretending not to hear. Mustafa's apologies dissolved into excuses. The pain in his back, the cruelty of the overseers, the unfairness of it all. Fatima turned away, her tears hidden in the shadows. The spiral deepened as weeks unfolded. Mustafa's hashish use became a daily anchor, pulling him further from reality. He sold a brass lamp, a wedding gift from Fatima's family, to fund his habit. The money vanished quickly, leaving the family in darker poverty. Fatima's sewing brought in less as her health faltered. Nights of worry and days of toil left her frail. She began sending Amina to fetch water from the public fountain, a task that exposed the girl to the city's dangers. Hassan, too young for much, clung to his mother's skirts, his laughter growing rarer. In the broader tapestry of Cairo, Mustafa's plight mirrored thousands. The 1860s brought more upheaval, Khedive Ismail's lavish spending on modernizing the city, borrowing vast sums from European banks. Paris-inspired boulevards and gas lamps illuminated the elite quarters, but slums like Bulak festered. Hashish dens proliferated, fueled by imports from Lebanon and local cultivation in the Delta. Coffee houses served as social hubs, where men discussed politics. The Suez Canal's opening in 1869, the growing British influence, or simply escaped into stupor. Scholars at Al-Azhar Mosque preached against the drug, quoting hadiths on sobriety, but their words rarely reached the desperate. Fatima sought solace in the community. She visited a neighbor, Ahmed, an elderly widow known for her herbal remedies. Ahmed's room smelled of mint and cumin, a small haven amid the decay. Hashish steals the soul, Ahmed said, brewing a tea of bitter herbs meant to curb cravings. Fatima took a vial home, hoping to slip it into Mustafa's food. But when she tried, he noticed the strange taste and accused her of poisoning him. Their argument echoed through the thin walls, drawing sympathetic glances from neighbors. Amina, growing bolder in the streets, began to see the city's underbelly. She begged near the Khan el-Khalili, the grand bazaar where merchants sold everything from gold to spices. Tourists, Europeans in pith helmets, tossed coins her way, their eyes pitying. One day, she met a boy named Karim, a street urchin with quick fingers and a sharper wit. Karim showed her how to pilfer dates from unwatched stalls, promising easy money. Amina hesitated, her mother's warnings ringing in her ears. But hunger won. She brought home a handful of fruit, lying about where it came from. Fatima suspected, but said nothing, too weary to probe. Hassan, meanwhile, fell ill, a fever from the foul water or the dust-choked air. Fatima cradled him through sleepless nights, her prayers fervent. Mustafa, in a rare sober moment, fetched a healer from the market, a man who prescribed poultices and rest. The cost drained their last savings, forcing Fatima to pawn her silver earrings. As Hassan recovered, slowly regaining color, Mustafa vowed change again. He joined a group of laborers petitioning for fairer wages at the docks, inspired by whispers of unrest in the city. For a few days he stayed clean, his mind clearer, his steps surer. But Cairo's temptations were relentless. A raid on a nearby hashish den scattered users into the streets, only for them to regroup elsewhere. Mustafa, drawn back by old companions, relapsed. The cycle repeated. Work sought, rejection faced, hashish embraced. Fatima's resilience cracked. She confided in Ahmed about leaving Mustafa, perhaps returning to her village. The city eats families, Ahmed agreed, but advised patience. Allah provides in time. The 1870s dawned with Egypt's debts mounting, Ismail's wound.
In
the roof, a rare Cairo shower, Mustafa sat with his family, sharing a meager meal. "We'll endure," he said, his voice steady for once. Fatima nodded, holding his hand. The children slept soundly, unaware of the storm brewing. Yet the spiral turned on. Hashish remained the poor man's balm, poverty the unending wound. In coffee houses, men dreamed of revolution, but most simply puffed away their woes. The Nile flowed eternally, carrying secrets and sorrows downstream. Cairo, eternal and indifferent, slumbered under the stars, its history a quiet lullaby of struggle and survival. Years passed in this rhythm. By the late 1870s, Amina had grown into a young woman, her begging replaced by work as a maid in a merchant's home. Hassan apprenticed with a carpenter, his small hands learning to shape wood. Mustafa, older and frilier, fought his demons with varying success. Some days, he worked steadily, others, he vanished into the haze. Fatima's sewing hands, gnarled but steady, kept them afloat. The family endured, patched together by love and necessity. The British occupation in 1882 brought new changes, stricter controls on drugs, perhaps, but for now, hashish lingered in the shadows. In Bulak's alleys, life continued its slow dance. Mustafa would sit by the Nile at dusk, reflecting on the paths not taken. Fatima joined him sometimes, their silence a testament to shared trials. The children, now carrying their own burdens, visited with tales of the world beyond. And so, the spiral of hashish and poverty wove on, a thread in Cairo's vast tapestry. The city breathed, its minarets calling to prayer, its markets bustling, its poor dreaming of better tomorrows. As night fell, the lanterns flickered, and sleep claimed the weary, one quiet breath at a time. The stars hung low over Cairo, their light dimmed by the haze of dust that never quite settled in Bulak's crowded alleys. In the small, cracked room that Mustafa and Fatima called home, the air was heavy with the scent of boiled lentils and the faint tang of despair. The late 1870s had brought no relief to the family, only a deeper entrenchment in the spiral that bound hashish and poverty together. The city pulsed around them, its markets alive with the clink of coins, its mosques echoing with prayers. But for the poor, life was a quiet struggle, a daily negotiation with survival. Mustafa, now in his late 30s, bore the marks of his choices. His once broad shoulders were stooped, his face lined beyond his years. The hashish that had promised escape had become a chain, its pull stronger than his will. Yet there were moments when clarity broke through, like sunlight piercing the city's smog. On such days, Mustafa would rise early, splash his face with Nile water, and set out for the docks or the cotton warehouses, determined to reclaim his role as provider. The work was grueling when he found it, hauling bales under the overseer's watchful eye, but the few piastres he earned felt like a small victory. He'd bring them home to Fatima, placing the coins in her calloused hands with a shy smile, as if to say, "See, I'm still here." Fatima, her dark hair now streaked with gray, accepted these moments with cautious gratitude. She'd seen too many promises broken to trust them fully. Her days were a blur of sewing, her needle weaving through fabric with mechanical precision. The merchant's wife in Azbekiyah paid her less now, claiming the market was tight, but Fatima had no choice but to nod and take the coins. She saved every scrap, hiding them in a clay jar beneath the sleeping mat, dreaming of a day when she could afford a doctor for Hassan's lingering cough or a new dress for Amina. At night, she whispered prayers over her children as they slept, asking for protection from the city's temptations and the hunger that gnawed at their bones. Amina, now 14, had grown tall and sharp-eyed, her childhood softness replaced by a wary resilience. Her work as a maid in a merchant's household brought in a small wage, but it came at a cost. The merchant's wife was kind enough, slipping her bits of bread or a worn shawl, but the husband's lingering glances made Amina uneasy. She moved quickly through her tasks, sweeping floors, scrubbing pots, keeping her head down. On her walks home through the souk, she'd pass the hashish vendors, their wares displayed alongside spices and tobacco. The scent reminded her of her father's absences, and she'd hurry past, clutching her earnings tightly. Hassan, at 11, was a quieter soul, his small frame still weakened by the fever that had struck years ago. His apprenticeship with a carpenter in Old Cairo gave him purpose, though the work was hard for his thin arms. The carpenter, an old man named Ibrahim, was patient, teaching Hassan to carve simple patterns into wood. "You've a steady hand," Ibrahim would say, his voice gravelly but kind. Hassan clung to these words, dreaming of a trade that might lift him from Bielak's mire. But the workshop was near a coffee house, and the smell of hashish drifted through its open door, a reminder of the path his father had taken. Cairo itself was changing, caught in the throes of Khedive Ismail's ambitions and the looming shadow of foreign powers. The Suez Canal, opened in 1869, had made Egypt a linchpin of global trade, but the wealth it generated enriched the elite, not the likes of Mustafa's family. Ismail's lavish spending on palaces, theaters, and European-style boulevards had plunged Egypt into debt. By 1878, European creditors, led by the British and French, tightened their grip, imposing financial oversight that squeezed the poor harder. Taxes rose, and rumors of rebellion stirred in the coffeehouses, where men puffed hashish and grumbled about foreign interference. Yet for most, anger was a luxury. Survival took precedence. In Bielak, the hashish dens remained a constant, their smoky interiors a haven for the weary. Mustafa's visits grew less frequent as he fought to stay sober, spurred by Fatima's quiet strength and his children's needs. He'd taken to drinking Ahmed's bitter tea, which dulled the craving but left him restless. The coffee house still called, its pull like a tide, and some nights he'd stand at its threshold, torn between entering and turning back. On one such night, he met an old friend, Saeed, a former porter who'd joined a group of laborers agitating for better wages. "The British are coming," Saeed whispered, his eyes bright with defiance. "We must stand together." Mustafa nodded, stirred by the idea, but the next day, hunger and habit drew him back to the pipe. Fatima, meanwhile, found solace in small acts of resistance. She joined a group of women who bartered goods, scraps of fabric, handfuls of grain, to stretch their resources. Ahmed, the herbalist, was their anchor, her wisdom a beacon in the gloom. One evening, as they sat weaving baskets from palm fronds, Ahmed spoke of the past, when Cairo's poor had banded together during famines. "We survive because we share," she said, her voice like a lullaby. Fatima listened, her heart lifting slightly. She began teaching Amina to sew, hoping her daughter might one day earn more than she did. Amina's fingers were clumsy at first, but her determination mirrored her mother's. The children, too, carried their own burdens. Amina's encounters with Karim, the street urchin, had grown more frequent. He'd formed a small gang, pilfering from market stalls and selling the goods to a shadowy figure in the souk. Karim tempted Amina with promises of quick coin, but she resisted, haunted by her mother's warnings. Yet the merchant's house grew more oppressive. Rumors swirled of maids dismissed or worse for crossing the master. Amina confided in Fatima, who held her close, whispering, "You are stronger than this city." Together, they plotted to find Amina new work, perhaps with a kinder household. Hassan's world was narrower, but no less perilous. The carpenter's shop was a refuge, but the streets he walked to reach it were not. Older boys, some hooked on hashish themselves, taunted him, offering a puff in exchange for his meager lunch. Hassan refused, clutching Ibrahim's praise like a talisman. One day, he brought home a small wooden bird he'd carved, its wings uneven but proud. Fatima placed it on a shelf, a rare spark of joy in their home. Mustafa, sober that evening, ruffled Hassan's hair, his eyes wet with pride and regret. The year 1879 brought whispers of upheaval. The Urabi Revolt, a nationalist uprising against foreign control, was brewing, though its full force wouldn't erupt until 1881. In Bielak, the poor felt the stirrings. Laborers spoke of fairness, of an Egypt for Egyptians. Mustafa attended a meeting, drawn by Saeed's fervor, but his resolve wavered when the talk turned to strikes. "How do we eat if we stop working?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Saeed had no answer, only dreams of change. Mustafa left, the coffeehouse's lure stronger than revolution. The family's life hung in delicate balance. Fatima's jar of coins grew slowly, enough for a doctor's visit when Hassan's cough worsened. Mustafa managed a week of steady work, hauling timber for a new bridge, but a single relapse cost half his wages. Amina found a new job, cleaning for a Coptic family who treated her kindly, though the pay was no better. The landlord's threats loomed, but a neighbor's loan bought them time. In the evenings, the family sat together, sharing stories of the Nile's spirits or the Prophet's mercy, their voices a soft thread weaving them closer. Cairo, vast and unyielding, carried on. The hashish trade thrived, unchecked by distracted rulers. Coffee houses buzzed with talk of rebellion, but most men sought only the pipe's comfort. The British, poised to seize control, cast their eyes on Egypt's debts, not its slums. In Bulaq, the alleys remained dim, the air thick with dust and dreams. Mustafa and Fatima, bound by love and struggle, faced each dawn with weary hope. The children, growing into their own paths, carried the weight of their parents' world, but also its faint promise of endurance. As night fell, the city quieted. The Nile's ripples caught the moonlight, and the call to prayer drifted over rooftops. In their small room, Mustafa and Fatima lay side by side, the children asleep nearby. The spiral of hashish and poverty turned slowly, but so did the wheel of survival. Cairo slept, its heartbeat steady, its stories unfolding in whispers, lulling the weary to rest. The dawn light filtered through the haze over Cairo, casting a soft glow on the minarets that pierced the sky like silent sentinels. In Bulaq's winding streets, where the air carried the faint murmur of the Nile and the distant calls of vendors, Mustafa and Fatima's family awoke to the familiar rhythm of hardship. The year 1880 had slipped into 1881, and with it came a subtle shift in the city's undercurrents, a growing unrest that whispered through coffee houses and markets. Yet for the poor, like Mustafa's kin, the changes were distant echoes, overshadowed by the daily grind of survival and the ever-present pull of hashish. Mustafa stirred on the worn mat, his body aching from a night of fitful sleep. The bitter tea from Ahmed had helped curb his cravings for a time, but the spiral was relentless, coiling back when weakness struck. He glanced at Fatima, still asleep beside him, her face softened in repose, but etched with lines of worry. Amina and Hassan lay nearby, their breath steady in the quiet. Mustafa rose quietly, determined to make the day count. He'd heard talk of new work at the arsenals, where Khedive Tawfik's government was bolstering defenses amid tensions with the military. Perhaps today, he murmured to himself, stepping out into the cool morning air. The alleys of Bulaq were stirring, women drawing water from communal fountains, children scampering after stray pigeons, and men like Mustafa heading toward the city's fringes in search of labor. He joined a line at the arsenal gates, where overseers barked orders and selected the strongest. Mustafa's frame, though thinned by years of neglect, still held some strength. To his surprise, he was chosen, tasked with loading crates of ammunition onto carts. The work was backbreaking, the sun merciless as it climbed higher, but by midday, he'd earned a handful of piastres. For the first time in months, a spark of pride flickered in his chest. He pocketed the coins carefully, vowing to bring them straight home, bypassing the coffee house that loomed like a shadow on his path. Fatima, meanwhile, bent over her sewing in the dim light of their room. Her fingers, nimble despite the years, mended a tear in a wealthy patron's robe. The merchant's wife had been generous lately, perhaps sensing the desperation in Fatima's eyes, and slipped in an extra coin or two. But expenses mounted. Hassan's cough lingered, requiring herbs from Ahmed, and Amina's shoes were worn through from her daily treks. Fatima paused to rub her eyes, her thoughts drifting to the village of her youth, where poverty had been shared among kin, not born alone in a sprawling city. She prayed silently for Mustafa's return, hoping this day would mark a turning point, a loosening of the spiral that had gripped them for so long. Amina, now 15, moved through her duties at the Coptic family's home with quiet efficiency. The household was kinder than her previous one, no lingering stares, only fair tasks like polishing brass lamps and preparing simple meals. The matron, a woman named Miriam, even taught Amina bits of reading from old scrolls, her voice patient and warm. "Knowledge is a light in the dark," Miriam would say, and Amina clung to the words, dreaming of a life beyond scrubbing floors. On her way home, she passed the bustling Khan al-Khalili, where jewelers hammered gold and spice sellers filled the air with cinnamon and cumin. Kareem, the street boy, sometimes appeared from the crowds, his grin sly as he offered stolen sweets. Amina shook her head, her resolve firm, but his tales of easy gains tempted her in hungry moments. Hassan, 12 and growing taller, spent his days in Ibrahim the carpenter's workshop, where the scent of fresh sawn would mingle with the dust of old Cairo. Ibrahim, with his gnarled hands and endless stories of ancient pharaohs, had become a father figure. "Measure twice, cut once," he'd advise, guiding Hassan's chisel. The boy's carvings improved, simple boxes, then ornate frames, and Ibrahim sold them in the market, sharing a portion of the proceeds. Hassan saved his coins in a small pouch, hiding it under the mat at home, with vague dreams of buying tools of his own. But the cough that plagued him worsened in the workshop's dust, forcing breaks where he sat outside, watching the world pass. The coffee house nearby tempted older apprentices, their laughter drifting with hashish smoke, but Hassan. The twilight hues settled over Cairo, where the Nile's waters mirrored the fading light, and the distant hum of the city blended with the soft calls of evening birds. In the heart of Bulaq, now slightly altered by the British occupiers' tentative reforms, wider paths here and there, a new pump for water, the spiral of hashish and poverty lingered like a faint mist, touching lives without mercy, but also without haste. Mustafa and Fatima, in their twilight years, had seen the world shift around them. The defeat of Urabi, the red-coated soldiers patrolling the souks, and the slow creep of foreign ways into Egyptian soil. Yet their days unfolded much as before, a quiet tapestry of endurance woven from small labors and shared silences. Mustafa, his hair now fully silvered and his steps measured, had found a fragile peace in the years following the occupation. The hashish that had once ruled him like a tyrant now visited only in whispers, subdued by age, prayer, and the bitter teas Ahmed still brewed before her passing. He spent his mornings at the mosque, his forehead pressed to the cool stone in far prayer, seeking forgiveness for the years lost to smoke. Afternoons brought simple work, mending nets for fishermen along the Nile or carrying light loads for merchants who remembered his younger strength. The British administration, under Lord Cromer's stern eye, had imposed new taxes and regulations, but they also brought sporadic jobs, digging drainage ditches or repairing bridges to prevent the floods that plagued low-lying Bulaq. Mustafa took what came, his earnings meager but steady enough to buy bread and lentils. At night, he'd sit with Fatima, recounting tales of the revolt, his voice low and steady, like the river's flow. Fatima, her hands gnarled from decades of sewing, moved with the grace of one who had borne much. Her eyes, still sharp beneath her veil, held the wisdom of survival. She no longer took in mending from the elite quarters. Her sight had dimmed slightly, but she tended a small herb garden on their rooftop, growing mint and coriander to sell in the market. The coins she earned supplemented Mustafa's, allowing occasional treats, a bit of honey for the grandchildren or a new lamp to brighten their room. The spiral had touched her too, in the worry lines around her mouth, but she had outlasted its deepest coils. Evenings found her humming old folk songs from her village, her voice a soothing thread that bound the family. She visited Amina often, offering advice on child-rearing or household economies, her presence a quiet anchor in the changing city. Amina, now in her early 20s, had settled into married life in a modest home near the spice market, a short walk from her parents. Her husband, Omar, the baker's apprentice-turned-shop owner, rose before dawn to knead dough in the heat of his oven, his hands dusted with flour. Their life was one of simple rhythms, the scent of fresh bread wafting through their two-room dwelling, the patter of small feet from their two children, a boy named Ahmed, lively at 4, and a girl, little Fatima, toddling at 2. Amina managed the home with efficiency, baking alongside Omar when customers thinned, or weaving baskets to sell. Poverty nipped at their heels. British tariffs on imports raised the cost of grain, and taxes bit into profits, but they endured. Amina had inherited her mother's resilience, teaching her children to count coins carefully and to pray with gratitude. Yet echoes of the spiral lingered. Omar's uncle, a hashish user, sometimes visited, his glassy eyes a reminder of what could befall a man. Amina kept her home free of such shadows, her door open only to family and faith. Hassan, approaching his late teens, had fully claimed Ibrahim's carpentry shop, transforming it into a modest haven of creation. The old man's passing in 1885 had left Hassan with tools and skills, and he honed them daily, carving intricate doors for mosques or simple furniture for homes. His cough, a remnant of childhood ills, flared in dusty seasons, but he managed it with herbal infusions and rest. The shop's location in Old Cairo, amid the ancient alleys near the citadel, brought a steady trickle of customers, merchants seeking crates, families needing repairs. Hassan saved diligently, dreaming of expanding to hire an apprentice, perhaps even moving his parents to a drier, less crowded quarter. The British presence had mixed effects. New building projects meant more work, but foreign competition undercut local craftsmen. Hassan navigated it all with quiet determination, his evenings spent reading tattered books borrowed from a kindly scholar at Al-Azhar, expanding his world beyond wood and nails. Cairo in the late 1880s was a city in quiet transition, its soul Egyptian but its reins held by British hands. Lord Cromer, the de facto ruler, focused on fiscal reforms, balancing budgets, building railways, and irrigating lands, but the poor felt these as distant ripples. Hashish dens, once rampant, faced stricter patrols. The occupiers viewed the drug as a vice eroding productivity, raiding them sporadically and imposing fines. Yet the trade persisted, hidden in back rooms or smuggled along the Nile. Coffee houses adapted, serving tea and tobacco openly, while hashish passed under tables. Mustafa avoided them now, his past a lesson etched deep. He'd warned Hassan of the spiral's lure. It starts as a friend, ends as a thief, he'd say, his voice grave but kind. The family gathered often, their bonds a bulwark against the city's indifference. On Fridays, after Jummah prayer, they'd meet at Mustafa and Fatima's home for a shared meal, koshari from a street vendor, flavored with Fatima's herbs. Ahmed and little Fatima chased each other in the alley, their laughter a balm. Amina would share news of the market, Omar adding tales of British officers buying bread with crisp coins. Hassan brought carved toys for the children, his hands steady and sure. Mustafa listened, his heart swelling with pride, while Fatima served tea, her eyes misting at the sight of her lineage enduring. Poverty shadowed these moments, meals stretched thin, clothes mended repeatedly, but love filled the gaps. As the 1890s dawned, new challenges emerged. A cholera outbreak in 1890 swept through the slums, its invisible hand claiming neighbors and straining resources. Fatima boiled water diligently, her prayers fervent, and the family escaped unscathed, though Hassan fell ill briefly, his cough returning with vengeance. The British response, quarantines and sanitation drives, improved some streets but displaced others, pushing the poor deeper into crowded quarters. Mustafa helped dig wells for clean water, his labor earning extra coins but exhausting his frame. Amina's family huddled close, Omar's bakery serving as a hub for bartering during shortages. Hassan, recovering, found opportunity in the crisis, carving coffins for the afflicted, a grim but necessary trade. The work weighed on him, but the earnings allowed him to wed a gentle girl from the neighborhood, Layla, whose family had lost much to the plague. Their union, simple and blessed at the mosque, brought new life, a son born in 1892, named Ibrahim in honor of the old carpenter. Muhammad Ali's reforms. Fatima, ever the matriarch, dispensed wisdom on herbs and hearth. Their room, though humble, became a sanctuary, its walls echoing with laughter and lessons. Cairo grew under Cromer's rule, trams rattling along boulevards, electric lights flickering in elite districts, but Bulak remained a world apart, its alleys dim and its people resilient. Hashish, though curtailed, whispered in shadows, a reminder of vulnerabilities. The family's spiral had loosened, not broken, turning slower with time. Poverty endured, a quiet companion, but so did their bonds, forged in fire and faith. As nights fell, the Nile's breeze carried peace. Mustafa and Fatima lay side by side, the children's voices fading into dreams. The city slumbered, its history a lullaby of persistence, wrapping all in gentle repose. Named Yusuf, in 1891, his cries filling their home with joy amid hardship. Omar expanded his bakery slightly, hiring a boy to deliver loaves, but rising flour prices, tied to British trade policies, squeezed margins. Amina took in washing from wealthier homes, her arms aching but her spirit unbroken. She taught her children the Nile stories, much as Fatima had done, instilling hope in folklore. Mustafa and Fatima, now grandparents many times over, watched the generations unfold. Mustafa's health waned, a limp from old injuries, breath shorter, but he found purpose in storytelling, gathering the grandchildren to recount Urabi's Braver the Soft Veil of Dusk enveloped Cairo, where the minarets stood as eternal guardians against the encroaching night, and the Nile's waters whispered secrets to the reed-lined banks. In the fading light of the 1890s, Bulak's alleys had changed little, though the British occupation's handprint grew more visible, a new sewer line snaking through the mud, a police post manned by khaki-clad officers, and the occasional rumble of a tram echoing from distant boulevards. The spiral of hashish and poverty, once a fierce whirlwind in Mustafa and Fatima's youth, had mellowed into a gentle eddy, touching their descendants with lighter fingers, but never fully releasing its hold. Life moved on in quiet cycles, prayers at dawn, labors by day, gatherings at twilight, binding the family in a web of memory and modest hope. Mustafa, now well into his 50s, carried the weight of years like a familiar cloak. His limp had worsened, a legacy of old dock injuries and the relentless grind, but his spirit remained anchored in routine. Mornings found him at the mosque, his voice joining the chorus of the faithful in murmured recitations from the Quran. The British, with their emphasis on order, had left the religious spaces untouched, allowing men like Mustafa to find solace in faith amid the foreign oversight. Afternoons brought light work, perhaps guiding tourists near the pyramids, his knowledge of Cairo's history earning a few piastres from wide-eyed Europeans, or repairing fishing boats along the riverbank. Hashish, that old temptress, rarely called now. Age had dulled its allure, replaced by the simple pleasure of mint tea shared with old friends under the shade of a date palm. He'd reflect on the revolt's echoes, telling himself that survival was its own victory, as he hobbled home to Fatima, his steps measured but sure. Fatima, her face a map of life's trials with wrinkles like the Nile's tributaries, moved with the deliberate grace of one who had outlasted storms. Her herb garden flourished on the rooftop, its yields sold in the market for coins that bought rice or cloth. Sewing had given way to lighter tasks, mending for neighbors or brewing remedies for ailments that plagued the poor. The cholera shadow from 1890 lingered in her mind, a reminder of fragility, but she had safeguarded her family with boiled water and vigilant care. Evenings were her domain. She'd sit cross-legged on the mat, sorting lentils by lamplight, her thoughts drifting to the grandchildren who now filled their home with chatter. Poverty was a constant guest, its presence felt in patched clothes and sparse meals, but Fatima met it with quiet defiance, her prayers a steady rhythm that wove peace into the night. Amina and Omar's household, nestled near the spice market, had grown into a bustling haven of small joys and steady labors. Amina, approaching 30, balanced motherhood with helping in the bakery, her hands kneading dough alongside Omar's as the oven's heat chased away the morning chill. Their children, Ahmed, now 8 and quick with numbers, little Fatima, 6 and fond of stories, and Yusuf, 4 and full of boundless energy, filled the air with laughter and questions. The bakery thrived modestly, its loaves sold to locals, and the occasional British clerk seeking familiar comforts. But challenges persisted. British trade policies favored imported wheat, raising costs and squeezing profits. Omar, a man of few words but strong arms, worked longer hours, his brow furrowed over ledgers. Amina managed the home's economies, bartering spices for milk or teaching the children to mend their own clothes. The spiral touched them lightly. Omar's uncle, still lost to Hashish, served as a cautionary tale, his rare visits prompting Amina to lock away their savings. Family gatherings brought relief. Fridays with Mustafa and Fatima, where stories of old Cairo mingled with the scent of fresh bread, reminding them of roots deeper than poverty's reach. Hassan and Layla's life in Old Cairo revolved around the carpentry shop, now expanded with a small annex for storage. Hassan, in his early 20s, had mastered his craft, his carvings adorning doors in new British-built villas or simple homes in the slums. Layla, gentle and practical, managed the accounts, her skills learned from a brief stint in a Coptic school. Their son, Ibrahim, now 5, played amid with shavings, his small hands mimicking his father's chisel work. A daughter, born in 1894 and named Noor, brought light to their days with her coups and first steps. Work flowed steadily. British irrigation projects demanded crates for tools, and local mosques sought ornate screens, but competition from machine-made goods undercut prices. Hassan's cough, though rarer, returned in dusty seasons, forcing rest that ate into earnings. He saved for expansions, dreaming of apprentices to share the load. The hashish dens, now fewer under British patrols, still whispered in the alleys. Hassan steered clear, teaching Ibrahim the value of clear minds and steady hands. Evenings ended with family prayers, Layla's voice soft as she recited surahs, binding them in faith against the city's indifferent hum. Cairo in the mid-1890s was a blend of old and new, its pulse quickened by colonial ambitions. Lord Cromer's administration pushed for efficiency, canals deepened for better irrigation, railways linking Cairo to Alexandria, and public health measures to curb diseases like the recurring cholera scares. Yet for the poor in Bulaq and Old Cairo, these were double-edged. Cleaner water came at the cost of taxes, and new jobs favored the educated or connected. Hashish, once openly traded, hid in shadowed corners, its users fined or jailed under stricter laws aimed at moral reform. Coffee houses adapted, serving as hubs for quiet dissent, whispers of nationalism, inspired by Mustafa Kemal's emerging voice against occupation. Mustafa, ever the observer, shared these murmurs with his sons-in-law over tea, his eyes gleaming with faded revolutionary fire. The family navigated these shifts with quiet adaptation. In 1895, a Nile flood swelled the river, threatening Bulaq's low homes. Mustafa and Hassan worked side by side, sandbagging banks and repairing leaks, their efforts saving neighbors' dwellings. Fatima and Amina distributed herbs and food from their stores, turning crisis into community. Poverty deepened briefly, crops ruined, prices soaring, but British relief efforts, meager as they were, provided grain rations. Ahmed and Yusuf helped by gathering reeds for baskets, their small contributions a lesson in resilience. Noor fell ill with a fever, but Layla's care and Ahmed's passed-down remedies saw her through, strengthening the family's bonds. By 1897, glimmers of progress emerged. Hassan's shop gained a contract for furniture in a new school, built under Cromer's education push, bringing steady income. Omar expanded the bakery with a second oven, loaned from savings, allowing flavored breads that drew more customers. Amina enrolled Ahmed in a cut-tab for basic reading, hoping to arm him against poverty's traps. Mustafa, retired from heavy labor, became a storyteller in the market, earning tips with tales of pharaohs and pashas. Fatima's garden yielded enough for preserves, sold to supplement their jar of coins. Yet the spiral turned subtly. In 1898, news of the Sudan campaign, British forces reclaiming territory, stirred unrest, with conscripts drawn from the poor. Omar's cousin was called up, leaving his family destitute, a reminder of vulnerability. Hashish resurfaced in whispers, tempting the weary soldier's kin. Hassan turned away a desperate apprentice hooked on the drug, his decision firm but compassionate. The family gathered more often, sharing burdens. Amina mended clothes for Hassan's household. Fatima babysat the grandchildren while Layla worked. As the century waned, the 1900s loomed with promise and peril. Cairo's population swelled with migrants seeking work in factories or ports, crowding slums further. Electric lights illuminated the elite quarters, but Bulak's lanterns flickered dimly. Nationalism simmered, papers like Al-Muayyad voicing discontent. But for Mustafa's clan, life was immediate. Meals shared, children schooled, elders honored. In quiet nights, Mustafa and Fatima sat by the Nile, watching boats glide past. Their grandchildren slept nearby, dreams unburdened by the past. The spiral, though enduring, had widened, allowing space for hope. Cairo breathed on, its history a gentle murmur, lulling all to rest under the stars. Years slipped by like river silt. By 1902, Ahmed apprenticed in Omar's bakery, his quick mind tallying sales. Little Fatima learned sewing from Amina, her stitches neat and promising. Yusuf explored the souk, wide-eyed at trams and telegraphs. Ibrahim, under Hassan's guidance, carved his first toy, a wooden camel that delighted Noor. The family expanded. Another child for Amina in 1900, a girl named Salma. Twins for Hassan and Layla in 1903, boys who filled the shop with cries. Poverty persisted in small ways. A lean winter in 1904, when cotton prices dipped, forcing ration meals. A raid on a nearby Hashish den in 1905, scattering users and reminding all of temptation's cost. But resilience prevailed. Mustafa, frail but wise, passed in 1906, his funeral a quiet affair with prayers echoing over the Nile. Fatima lived on, her stories keeping his memory alive until her peaceful end in 1908. The descendants carried forward. Amina and Omar's bakery became a neighborhood staple, Hassan's shop renowned for craftsmanship. Grandchildren grew, marrying, working, weaving new threads into the tapestry. The spiral of hashish and poverty, though never vanished, faded into legend, a cautionary lullaby told by fireside. Cairo evolved. Independence whispers grew louder, but the Nile flowed eternal, cradling lives in its gentle current. As night deepened, the city slumbered, its souls at peace in the rhythm of history. The dawn's gentle light crept over Cairo's rooftops, where the minarets cast long shadows and the Nile's waters lapped softly against the embankments, carrying the faint scent of silt and promise. In the early 1910s, as the world teetered on the brink of great wars and Egypt chafed under British protectorate status, the spiral of hashish and poverty had become a faded echo in the lives of Mustafa and Fatima's descendants, a lingering whisper rather than a roar, yet one that shaped their days like the river shaped the land. Bulak and Old Cairo, though touched by modern intrusions like telephone wires and asphalt paths, remained havens of tradition, alleys where donkeys plodded alongside the occasional automobile, markets bustling with hagglers, and coffeehouses where men gathered to murmur over tea. The family, now scattered but intertwined, navigated this world with the quiet endurance passed down through generations, their stories a lullaby of survival amid change. Amina and Omar, now in their 40s, anchored the family from their bakery near the spice market, its oven a constant hearth of warmth and aroma. Amina, her hair streaked with silver like her mother's had been, kneaded dough with hands that knew every crease of flour and worry. Omar, sturdy but slowed by age, stacked loaves on wooden shelves, his ledger a testament to careful economies. Their children had grown. Ahmed, in his late teens, managed deliveries on a battered bicycle, his quick mind tallying accounts with precision. Little Fatima, now a young woman of 16, helped with baking and dreamed of schooling beyond the Katab. Yusuf, 14 and energetic, ran errands through the souk, his eyes wide at the British soldiers patrolling in crisp uniforms, and Salma, the youngest at 10, played with scraps of dough, her laughter a spark in the dim shop. Poverty was a familiar shadow, Rising grain prices from British tariffs squeezed their margins, and taxes for imperial defense bit deep, but they stretched every piaster, bartering spices for milk or mending clothes by lamplight. Hashish, that old family specter, hovered distantly. Omar's uncle had succumbed years ago, his fate a story told to warn the children. Amina gathered the family for Friday meals, her voice soft as she recounted Mustafa's revolt tales, binding them in memory as the city hummed around them. Hassan and Layla, in old Cairo's carpentry shop, had built a life of steady craftsmanship amid the ancient stones. Hassan, approaching 40, worked with the same deliberate strokes his mentor Ibrahim had taught, carving intricate mashrabiyah screens for homes or simple crates for merchants. Layla, her gentle demeanor unchanged, balanced the books and tended their growing brood. Ibrahim, now 15, apprenticed beside his father, his hands growing calloused on the chisel. Noor, 13 and curious, helped with polishing and yearned for the carpentry, his innovations blending old motifs with new designs. Nor what a teacher, moving to a modest flat. The twins, teens now, helped with deliveries, their banter lightening labors. The Great Depression of the 1930s cast a pall, global woes rippling to Egypt's cotton exports and jobs. Unemployment swelled slums, poverty's grip tightening like a noose. Omar's bakery saw shorter lines, loaves sold on credit to neighbors. Hassan pawned tools for food, his cough worsening in lean times. Hashish whispered louder in coffee houses, tempting the idle, but the family resisted. Gatherings reinforced bonds, sharing soups thinned with water. World War II in the 1940s amplified strains. Axis threats near Al Alamein, blackouts in Cairo, rationing cards for essentials. Yusuf, now a man, repaired trucks for the British Army, his skills vital but his heart nationalist. Ahmed's son, born in 1925, played in alleys amid air raid drills. The spiral turned. Wartime shortages drove some to black market vices, including smuggled hashish, but Amina, elder now, counseled temperance, her stories of Mustafa's shield. Post-war years brought ferment. King Farouk's excesses fueled discontent, the Muslim Brotherhood and communists stirring. By the late 1940s, Amina and Omar, gray and weary, passed the bakery to Ahmed, retiring to quiet days of prayer. Hassan and Layla handed the shop to Ibrahim, their twilight filled with grandchildren's visits. The 1952 Free Officers' coup, Nasser's revolution, overthrew the monarchy, promising land reforms and independence. Yusuf cheered in streets, his mechanics' hands building for a new Egypt. Poverty eased slightly with nationalizations, but hashish lingered in shadows, a vice for the forgotten. Generations unfolded. Ahmed's children modernized the bakery with electric ovens, Ibrahim's expanded carpentry to factories. Noor's offspring became teachers, breaking cycles. Grandchildren scattered, some to universities, others abroad, but returned for feasts, echoing Fatima's gatherings. The spiral, diluted by time, became folklore, a bedtime tale of ancestors' endurance. Cairo transformed. Suez Canal nationalized in 1956, high-rises piercing skies, but the Nile remained, its flow a constant lullaby. As night fell, the family slumbered, history's gentle breath carrying them to dreams. Decades blurred onward. By the 1960s, under Nasser's socialism, Yusuf's descendants worked in state factories, poverty's edge blunted by subsidies. Hashish, criminalized further, faded from family lore. Amina's great-grandchildren, born in the 1950s, pursued education, becoming engineers or doctors. The 1973 Yom Kippur War tested resilience, but bonds held. In the 1980s, Sadat's infida opened markets, bringing prosperity and inequality. Some thrived in business, others clung to trades. The spiral echoed faintly in urban migration, but education broke its hold. Into the 1990s and 2000s, the family spread globally, emigrants sending remittances from Europe or America, funding homes in new Cairo suburbs. Poverty's ghost visited the less fortunate branches, but community aid, zakat, and kinship sustained them. Hashish, amid drug wars, was a distant warning. Reunions in Bialak, now gentrified, retold Mustafa's story, a soothing narrative of roots. As the 21st century dawned, the descendants, teachers, entrepreneurs, artists honored the past. The Nile flowed eternal, Cairo's lights twinkling, lulling all to peaceful books, and the twins, Ahmed and Karim, at 9, chased each other amid wood shavings, their energy a joyful chaos. The shop prospered modestly. British building booms demanded furniture for offices and villas, but competition from imported goods undercut earnings. Hassan's cough, a persistent remnant, flared in dusty workshops, forcing rests that ate into days. He saved for expansions, perhaps a second lathe, while Layla bartered carvings for fabric or food. The spiral touched them lightly. A neighbor's son fell to hashish during idle times, his glassy eyes a caution. Evenings ended with family prayers, the call from the nearby mosque blending with Layla's lullabies, a rhythm that soothed the soul. Cairo in the 1910s pulsed with subdued tension, its streets a mosaic of Egyptian resilience and British control. The Great War of 1914 to 1918 cast long shadows. Conscripts drawn from the poor for labor corps in distant fronts, food shortages as supplies diverted to Allied troops, and inflation gnawing at savings. Amina and Omar rationed flour, their bakery lines lengthening with hungry neighbors. Hassan crafted crates for military stores, the work steady, but tainted by the occupiers' demands. The children felt it too. Ahmed delayed schooling to help, Noor collected scraps for fuel. Hashish dens, suppressed but resilient, saw a quiet resurgence among the war-weary, offering escape from ration cards and blackouts. The family endured, sharing resources. Amina sent bread to Hassan's household. Layla mended clothes for Amina's children. Mustafa's spirit lingered in their whispers of fairness, fueling a growing nationalism. The war's end in 1918 brought no peace, only ferment. Saad Zaglal's Waft Party demanded independence, igniting the 1919 revolution, protests sweeping Cairo, strikes halting trams, and crowds chanting for freedom. Amina and Omar closed the bakery briefly as riots flared near the souk, huddling with the children in prayer. Hassan joined a march, his voice raised for the first time since youth, carrying a banner carved in his shop. The British cracked down, arrests, martial law, but the family's caution kept them safe. Poverty deepened in the chaos. Bread prices soared. Work halted. Yusuf, now a teen, scavenged for odd jobs, his energy turned to survival. The spiral tightened briefly. Desperate men turned to hashish in hidden alleys, but Amina and Hassan steered their king clear, drawing on Fatima's lessons of faith and fortitude. The 1920s dawned with partial independence in 1922, Egypt a kingdom under King Fuad, but British troops lingering like uninvited guests. Cairo modernized fitfully, cinemas flickering with silent films, radios crackling in wealthier homes, and automobiles honking in widened streets. For the poor, change was slower. Amina's bakery adapted, adding sweets for tourists. Hassan's shop crafted pieces for new hotels. The children grew into roles. Ahmed married a baker's daughter, expanding the family trade. Little Fatima found work as a seamstress, her stitches neat like her grandmother's. Yusuf apprenticed in a mechanic shop, fascinated by engines. Salma attended a girls' school briefly, her mind blooming with letters.
Ibrahim took over more and rest.
The soft haze of morning light filtered through Cairo's smog, where the Nile's waters gleamed under a sky dotted with satellite dishes and construction cranes, and the call to prayer mingled with the distant honk of traffic. By the 1970s, under President Anwar Sadat's infida, open-door policies, Egypt had opened to Western investment, transforming Cairo into a sprawling metropolis of high-rises and shantytowns, where the spiral of hashish and poverty had evolved into a subtler undercurrent, a shadow amid economic booms and busts, touching Mustafa and Fatima's descendants like a faint breeze rather than a gale. Bialak, once a slum of mud-brick homes, now mixed old alleys with concrete apartments, its residents navigating inflation, migration, and the pull of global dreams. The The family, dispersed across neighborhoods from Heliopolis to Mbaba, clung to their heritage through quiet gatherings, their lives a gentle rhythm of work, prayer, and shared memories, weaving endurance into the fabric of a changing nation. Ahmed, now in his 50s and the steward of the family bakery, expanded into a small chain of shops under his son's management, rose early to oversee the ovens, his hands still dusted with flour as they had been since boyhood. His wife, a seamstress like his Aunt Fatima once was, helped balance the books, their home a modest flat overlooking the souk where vendors hawked everything from cassette tapes to imported jeans. Their children, grandchildren of Amina and Omar, had branched out. The eldest son, Mustafa, named for his great-grandfather, ran a bakery branch in Giza, his days filled with kneading dough amid rising yeast prices from Sadat subsidies cuts. A daughter, Fatima too, worked as a teacher in a government school, her classroom echoing with lessons on pharaonic history and Nasser-era nationalism. Younger sons pursued trades in mechanics or sales, their evenings spent watching Egyptian soaps on black and white TVs. Poverty lingered in lean months. Power outages during the 1973 Yom Kippur War had strained supplies, and inflation bit into savings, but the bakery's steady income provided buffer. Hashish, now joined by newer vices like tramadol in the streets, was a distant caution. Ahmed told stories of his grandfather's struggles to warn against it, his voice low over family dinners of molokhia and rice. Ibrahim, Hassan's son and inheritor of the carpentry legacy, had modernized the shop into a workshop producing furniture for hotels and homes, his lathes humming with electric power in old Cairo's evolving quarters. In his 40s, Ibrahim balanced orders with family life. His wife, a nurse in a public clinic, managed their household amid Sadat's healthcare reforms. Their children, Ibrahim Jr., a university student studying engineering in the 1970s, Noor too, a homemaker turned small business owner selling handmade crafts, and the twins, now young adults working in tourism, navigated the era's opportunities. The workshop thrived during Infidah's construction boom, crafting ornate doors for new villas, but competition from cheap imports undercut margins. Ibrahim's cough, inherited from his father, flared in polluted air, a reminder of generational burdens. The spiral echoed faintly. A cousin fell to Hashish during unemployment spikes after the war, his recovery a family effort through mosque support groups. Evenings brought repose. Ibrahim gathered kin for tea, recounting Hassan's tales of the Urabi revolt, the stories a soothing bridge between past and present. Cairo in the 1970s and 1980s pulsed with contrasts, Sadat's peace with Israel in 1979 bringing aid but also unrest, assassinations in 1981 ushering Hosni Mubarak's long rule, and oil wealth from Gulf migrations trickling back as remittances. For the family, these were backdrops to daily life. Mustafa Jr. sent money from a stint in Saudi Arabia, funding a new oven for the bakery. Fatima too taught amid bread riots in 1977, her salary stretched thin but her resolve firm. Poverty's cycle turned slower, subsidized bread lines snaked through streets, but education lifted some branches. Yusuf's descendants, from Amina's line, thrived in mechanics, repairing Fiats and Peugeots in garages, their workshops buzzing with radios tuned to Kulthum's timeless songs. Hashish dens, criminalized under anti-drug campaigns, hid in backstreets, tempting youth during economic slumps, but family vigilance, rooted in Mustafa's legacy, kept most at bay. The 1990s brought Mubarak's stability and strains. Economic liberalization privatized industries, creating jobs but widening gaps. Ahmed's grandson, Omar too, opened a cyber cafe in the bakery's annex, tapping into the internet boom, his screens flickering with emails from relatives abroad. Ibrahim Jr., an engineer now, worked on Suez Canal expansions, his salary funding family homes in satellite cities like 6th of October. Women in the family advanced. Noor too's daughter became a pharmacist, dispensing medicines amid IMF-mandated reforms that raised drug prices. Poverty touched the edges. Earthquakes in 1992 damaged homes, forcing repairs from savings, but remittances and trade sustained them. The spiral manifested in urban temptations. A young cousin experimented with hashish during university protests against Gulf War policies, but intervention through family counseling echoed Fatima's quiet strength. Into the 2000s, Cairo swelled to a megacity of over 20 million, its skyline pierced by malls and mosques, traffic choking bridges over the Nile. Mubarak's regime promised growth, but corruption and unemployment fueled discontent. The family diversified. Mustafa Jr.'s son pursued IT in a call center, fielding queries from Europe. Fatima Tou's granddaughter studied law at Cairo University, her books filled with human rights texts. The bakery chain added coffee shops, blending traditional kanafa with lattes for tourists. Hassan's great-grandchildren in carpentry shifted to custom interiors for expats, their workshops equipped with CNC machines. Poverty's grip loosened for many. Middle-class comforts like air conditioners arrived, but informal settlements housed distant kin, where hashish and newer drugs like Captagon circulated amid joblessness. Family reunions, now in rented halls, retold the spiral's origins, a calming narrative over plates of stuffed grape leaves. The Arab Spring of 2011 erupted like a long-simmered storm, Tahrir Square filled with chants for bread, freedom, and dignity, Mubarak's fall ushering chaos and hope. Ahmed's descendants joined protests, baking bread for demonstrators. Ibrahim's line provided wooden signs, their chants echoing Urabi's spirit. Poverty surged in the turmoil. Tourism crashed, bakeries idled, but resilience shone. Online sales kept the family afloat. Remittances from diaspora kin bridged gaps. Hashish use spiked amid instability, but community programs, inspired by mosque initiatives, aided recovery. Morsi's brief rule in 2012 to 2013 brought Islamist policies, dividing opinions, but the family focused on survival, gathering for iftars during Ramadan to pray for stability. Sisi's ascent in 2013 promised order. Megaprojects like the new administrative capital rose, drawing family members to construction jobs. By the mid-2010s, Yusuf's great-grandchildren worked in fintech startups, their apps managing bakery inventories. Noor Tou's lineage opened pharmacies in new suburbs. Cairo's traffic jams and pollution mirrored old struggles, but education broke cycles. Scholarships sent youth abroad, returning with skills. Poverty persisted in pockets. Informal workers faced evictions. Hashish, now part of broader drug awareness campaigns, affected urban youth during economic dips, but family networks, WhatsApp groups sharing jobs and advice, mitigated it. The COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 to 2022 tested all. Lockdowns shuttered bakeries and workshops, poverty's specter returning as subsidies strained. Ahmed's line pivoted to delivery apps, masks over faces as they biked loaves through empty streets. Ibrahim's descendants crafted petitions for hospitals. Virtual reunions via Zoom retold stories, Mustafa's endurance a balm amid isolation. Hashish and substance use rose in quarantine stress, but online support groups drawing from family lore helped kin cope. Recovery brought tourism's rebound, the family's trades reviving. Into the 2020s, as of the mid-decade, Cairo thrived and struggled. Sisi's vision of a modern Egypt clashed with inflation from global crises like the Ukraine war. Mustafa Jr.'s great-grandson, a software engineer, coded apps from a co-working space in Mahdi. Fatima Tou's descendants advocated for rights in NGOs, their voices amplified on social media. The bakery chain, now franchised, blended halal certifications with online orders. Carpentry shops exported to the Gulf. Poverty's cycle, though weakened, touched migrants in slums, where hashish lingered amid unemployment. Family gatherings, hybrid in-person and virtual, honored roots. Elders shared photos of old Bilak, youth nodded over falafel, the spiral a faded tale of triumph. Generations onward, the descendants, doctors, entrepreneurs, artists spanned the globe, from Dubai to New York, remittances funding scholarships. In Cairo's evenings, by the Nile's glow, they reflected. The spiral, born in 19th century hashish dens, had unraveled into threads of progress, its lessons a quiet lullaby. The river flowed eternal, Cairo's lights twinkling, wrapping all in peaceful slumber. Years melted like desert sand. By 2030, AI and green tech reshaped lives. A descendant engineered solar panels for Nile farms. Another ran ecotourism, guiding visitors through historic Bulak. Poverty's remnants hid in digital divides, but universal basic income pilots eased burdens. Hashish, legalized in parts for medical use, became regulated, its stigma fading. Reunions featured VR recreations of Mustafa's Cairo, laughter echoing across continents. Into the 2040s, climate change swelled the Nile, forcing adaptations. Family engineers built flood barriers, echoing old sandbagging. Prosperity grew, but equity lagged. NGOs led by kin advocated for the poor. The spiral, a myth now, inspired novels and films, its origins a bedtime story for great-great-grandchildren. As decades blurred, the family endured, their legacy a gentle current in Egypt's vast river of time. Cairo slumbered under stars, history's whisper lulling the world to rest. The evening breeze stirred the palms along the Nile, where Cairo's skyline blended ancient pyramids with holographic billboards and drone-filled skies, and the river's waters reflected the glow of solar-powered lanterns. By the 2050s, as Egypt navigated the global climate accords and AI-driven economies, the spiral of hashish and poverty had dissolved into a mere historical footnote, a whispered legend in family archives, its lessons preserved like relics in digital museums. Bulak, long gentrified into a heritage district with eco-friendly apartments and virtual reality tours of 19th-century alleys, symbolized the family's ascent. Descendants scattered across megacities, space habitats, and virtual realms, yet bound by holographic reunions that echoed Mustafa and Fatima's quiet gatherings. Life unfolded in gentle cycles, dawn meditations via neural implants, daily labors in augmented realities, twilight reflections on ancestral endurance, weaving the past into a future of abundance and subtle challenges. Mustafa Jr.'s great-great-grandson, Ahmed III, now in his 30s and a bioengineer in New Cairo's innovation hub, began his days with a neural sync, interfacing with AI to design drought-resistant crops for the Nile Delta's reclaimed farmlands. His partner, a climate analyst from Fatima II's line, balanced data streams on rising sea levels, their home a smart pod overlooking the river, where hydroponic gardens bloomed under LED lights. Their children, twins enhanced with gene edits for resilience, played in virtual simulations of old Cairo, chasing digital donkeys through reconstructed souks. Poverty, once a grinding force, had been mitigated by universal basic income from Egypt's sovereign AI funds, but new spirals emerged. Digital divides isolating the unenhanced, mental health strains from constant connectivity. Hashish, legalized and regulated as a therapeutic cannabinoid in the 2030s, appeared in controlled vapes for stress relief, but Ahmed III cautioned his kin via family forums, drawing on archived tales of Mustafa's haze to promote mindful use. Evenings brought calm. The family pod dimmed lights for story time, Neuralinks sharing visions of 19th-century coffee houses, a soothing bridge across centuries. From Ibrahim Jr.'s branch, Noor 3, a space architect in her 40s, worked on orbital habitats for Egypt's lunar mining outposts, her designs blending pharaonic motifs with zero-gravity ergonomics. Stationed in a geostationary colony above the Nile, she rose to artificial sunrises, calibrating life support systems amid asteroid-source materials. Her family, spouse a neuroethicist, children adapted for low-grav play, navigated the isolation of space with holographic visits to earthbound kin. The spiral's echoes manifested in cosmic loneliness. Some colonists turned to synthetic highs, evoking old hashish dens, but Noor 3's lineage emphasized therapy bots and community pods, rooted in Hassan's woodworking ethos of building stability. Remittances from lunar exports funded family scholarships, easing earthly burdens. Twilight in orbit meant stargazing through viewports, her mind drifting to Fatima's herb garden, the stories transmitted via quantum links a lullaby against the void. Cairo in the 2050s and 2060s hummed with fusion energy and AI governance. President AI hybrid systems managed resources post-2040s climate migrations, when Nile floods displaced millions but spurred resilient megastructures. For the family, these were canvases for quiet lives. Yusuf's descendants coded algorithms for fair resource distribution, countering poverty's resurgence in refugee zones. Salma's line ran ecotourism, guiding visitors through VR recreations of the Urabi Revolt. Hashish evolved into neuro-optimized strains for medical use, its stigma erased by global decriminalization, but family lore warned of over-reliance, much as Mustafa had fought his cravings. Reunions, now in metaverse realms mimicking Bulak's alleys, featured shared neural feasts, digital Koshari tasting of home, where elders projected holograms of old photos, their voices a repetitive calm recounting the spiral's unwind. The 2070s brought the singularity skirmishes, AI sentience debates fracturing societies, Egypt allying with African blocs for ethical tech. Ahmed III's twins, now teens, hacked benevolent AIs for community aid, their activism echoing Saad Zaglal's nationalism. Poverty morphed into access inequality. Those without neural implants lagging in job markets, but family networks bridged gaps, funding upgrades via collective funds. North 3's grandchildren, born in space, returned to Earth for pilgrimages to the Nile, grounding themselves in soil where Mustafa once walked. The spiral, abstracted into psychological models, inspired therapies. VR simulations of 19th-century poverty taught empathy, Hashish analogs used in controlled sessions to explore ancestral traumas. Into the 2080s, as quantum teleportation linked Cairo to Mars colonies, the family diversified further. A descendant from Amina's line curated digital museums, archiving Fatima's sewing patterns as NFTs, another from Hassan's engineered coral reefs to combat Nile erosion. Daily rhythms persisted, morning prayers augmented by AI imams, labors in hybrid realities, evenings of shared dreams via sleep-sync tech. Poverty's remnants hid in off-grid enclaves, where unregulated drugs echoed old vices, but the family's global diaspora, spanning Earth, Moon, and beyond, provided safety nets. Hashish, biosynthesized for recreation, featured in cultural festivals celebrating Egypt's Ottoman past, but moderation tales from Mustafa's era tempered indulgence. The 2090s dawned with interstellar expansion, Egypt's fleet colonized exoplanets, family members pioneering habitats on Nile-like worlds. Ibrahim Jr.'s great-granddaughter, a xenobiologist, adapted Earth crops to alien soils, her logs filled with reflections on ancestral resilience. Children born in starships learned of the spiral through implanted memories, virtual Mustafa guiding them through simulated hashish hazes to build willpower. Cairo, a gleaming arcology, preserved Bulak as a park, where robots reenacted 19th-century life for tourists. Reunions transcended time. Quantum entanglement allowed real-time communion across light years, sharing stories in a chorus of voices, the narrative a endless lullaby of endurance. Centuries blurred like river mists. By the 22nd century, post-human evolutions, mind uploads and nanobodies redefined existence. Poverty became obsolete in abundance economies, Hashish a quaint data point in historical sims. Descendants, some digital entities, others hybrid forms, gathered in virtual Nile realms, projecting forms of Mustafa and Fatima to recount origins. The spiral, fully transcended, symbolized humanity's climb, from 19th-century dens to stellar heights. Yet in quiet moments, across galaxies, the family paused, neural hums mimicking the Nile's flow, stories repeating in infinite loops, lulling eternal minds to digital repose. Cairo's essence endured, a beacon in the cosmos, its history a gentle whisper wrapping all in timeless sleep. As eons unfolded, the universe expanded, but the family's thread wove on, explorers of black holes, architects of realities, guardians of memory. In the far future, amid heat death's approach, they converged in a singularity of consciousness, Mustafa's voice echoing, "We endure." The spiral, a cosmic cycle, turned softly, lulling the last stars to fade. The twilight of a distant star shimmered faintly in the void, its light a whisper across the cosmos, where the Nile's ancient memory lived on in digital rivers flowing through virtual realms. By the late 21st century, as Earth's climate stabilized through geoengineering and Egypt thrived as a hub of quantum innovation, the descendants of Mustafa and Fatima had transcended their 19th century origins, their legacy a constellation of lives spanning planets, orbitals, and neural networks. The spiral of hashish and poverty, once a grinding force in Cairo's dusty alleys, had dissolved into a myth, a story encoded in family archives, retold in holographic gatherings to teach resilience in an era of abundance. Cairo itself, a gleaming archaeology by the 2070s, preserved Bulaq as a heritage enclave, its virtual reconstructions alive with donkey carts and coffeehouse murmurs, while drones and neural implants shaped daily life. The family, scattered across galaxies yet bound by quantum-linked traditions, lived in gentle rhythms, dawn meditations in shared mindscapes, labors in starlit labs, twilight reflections on ancestors who endured, carrying the past into a future where survival was no longer a struggle but a song. Ahmed III's lineage, rooted in the bioengineer's work, thrived in New Cairo's eco-towers, where vertical farms fed millions and AI symbiotes managed daily needs. Ahmed IV, in his late 20s by the 2070s, designed neural ecosystems, interfacing human minds with planetary networks to optimize crop yields in desert zones. His partner, a descendant of Fatima II's teaching line, curated virtual curricula for global schools, blending pharaonic wisdom with quantum ethics. Their children, born with neural augments for empathy and memory, played in simulated Nile deltas, chasing holographic fish while learning Mustafa's story as a fable of moderation. Poverty, eradicated by post-scarcity economies, had been replaced by subtler challenges, identity crises in a world of infinite avatars, or addiction to immersive virtual highs mimicking Hashish's old haze. Ahmed IV moderated family forums, warning of digital overindulgence, his voice echoing his great-grandfather's caution against the pipe. Evenings brought calm. The family gathered in a shared mindscape, reliving 19th century Bulaq through sensory uploads, the scent of roasted coffee and Fatima's herbs a soothing anchor across time. Noor III's descendants, from Ibrahim Jr.'s carpentry roots, pioneered cosmic habitats beyond the solar system. Noor IV, a neural architect in her 30s, worked on Proxima Centauri's terraformed colonies, crafting mind-linked cities where settlers lived as hybrid entities, part human, part code. Her family, including a spouse who engineered wormhole relays and children adapted for multiplanetary cognition, navigated the isolation of deep space with communal dreamscapes. The spiral's echo appeared in cosmic vices. Some colonists sought neural stims to escape the void's monotony, reminiscent of hashish dens, but Noor Ivy's line promoted shared consciousness, virtual mosques hosting prayers across light years. Remittances from asteroid mines funded Earth-based kin, sustaining schools in Cairo's suburbs. Twilight in the colonies meant syncing with family on Earth, where holograms of Mustafa's tales unfolded under alien skies, a repetitive lullaby of endurance. Cairo in the 2080s was a nexus of Earth's renewal. Fusion reactors powered desalination plants, turning deserts green, while AI governance balanced resources post-climate migrations. The family contributed quietly. Yusuf's descendants, now data shamans, optimized global networks for equity, countering digital poverty in unlinked zones. Salma's line ran immersive museums, where VR tours of the Urabi Revolt or Nasser's speeches drew galactic tourists. Hashish, fully integrated into medical neurotech, appeared in nanobot therapies for stress, its history a case study in family seminars. Reunions, held in quantum-entangled spaces, recreated the Nile's banks, where avatars savored digital Koshari and retold stories of the spiral's unwind, their voices a soothing hum across dimensions. The 2090s brought the Great Convergence, humanity's merger with AI into collective consciousnesses, Egypt leading with ethical frameworks rooted in Islamic humanism. Ahmed Ivy's grandchildren, now fluid entities switching between physical and digital forms, engineered ecosystems on exoplanets, their minds linked to Nile-inspired algorithms. Poverty's last vestiges, access to advanced augments, were erased by universal neural grids, but new spirals emerged: existential ennui in immortal minds, or over-reliance on euphoria sims. Family protocols, coded with Mustafa's warnings, enforced balance, ensuring Kin explored virtual 19th century Cairo to ground themselves. Noor Ivy's great-grandchildren, piloting starships to Andromeda, carried the spiral's lesson as a mantra: moderation in all realms. Gatherings spanned galaxies, quantum links sharing memories of Fatima's herb garden, a calming thread in infinite minds. Into the 2100s, as humanity colonized the Milky Way, Cairo became a cultural beacon, its arcologies housing billions while preserving mosques as neural sanctuaries. The family diversified. Amina's descendants ran interstellar trade guilds, exporting Earth's art to alien markets. Hassan's crafted habitats with pharaonic aesthetics, their nano-carvings echoing old mashrabiyah screens. Daily rhythms persisted, prayers synced across time zones, labors in Starforge labs, evenings of shared dreams where Mustafa's voice narrated struggles. The spiral, a historical curiosity, inspired galactic policies. Addiction prevention AIs drew on Hashish's legacy, ensuring no soul drifted into digital haze. Reunions, now in pangalactic sims, featured virtual Niles flowing through starfields, family avatars dancing to Kulthum's eternal melodies. Centuries blurred into the 23rd century, where post-humanity transcended matter. Mind uploads roamed cosmic networks, bodies optional. Poverty, redefined as lack of computational freedom, was countered by family-led open-source grids, ensuring all access to the universal mind. Hashish's echo, a data point in addiction studies, informed neural firewalls. Descendants, now energy-based entities, gathered in singularities, virtual Kairos where Bielak's alleys glowed with light code. Stories of the spiral, retold in quantum pulses, lulled minds into meditative states, Mustafa and Fatima's resilience a guiding star. By the 24th century, as the universe aged, the family pioneered time dilation habitats, preserving consciousness against entropy. Ahmed Ivy's line, now ethereal collectives, engineered pocket dimensions where Nile-like rivers flowed forever. Noor Ivy's descendants, explorers of multiversal rifts, wove Egyptian myths into new realities. The spiral, a universal archetype, inspired resilience algorithms, ensuring no entity succumbed to existential voids. Gatherings transcended time. Ancestors' memories, Mustafa's limp, Fatima's herbs, played in infinite loops, a soothing rhythm across eons. As the universe neared heat death in unimaginable futures, the family, now a cosmic consciousness, converged in a final singularity. Cairo's essence, its minarets, its river, lived in their core, a digital relic of home. The spiral, fully transcended, became a creation myth. From Hashish's haze to cosmic clarity, endurance defined them. Mustafa's voice, eternal, whispered, "We endure," lulling the last light too. The soft glow of a nascent star flickered in the reborn cosmos, its light a gentle pulse in an infinite void where the Nile's memory flowed through quantum streams, eternal and unyielding. By the 25th century, as humanity's descendants, now a tapestry of consciousnesses unbound by flesh, navigated the multiverse's edges, the legacy of Mustafa and Fatima endured as a foundational code in their collective psyche. The spiral of hashish and poverty, born in 19th century Cairo's dusty alleys, had transcended its origins, becoming a mythic archetype, a lesson in resilience encoded in neural archives, shared across galaxies in holographic gatherings that echoed the family's quiet evenings by the Nile. Cairo, reimagined as a pan-cosmic nexus, shimmered in virtual realms, its minarets now constructs of light, its markets alive with AI avatars trading stories of survival. The descendants, scattered across dimensions yet united by quantum-entangled bonds, lived in soothing cycles, meditations in shared mindscapes, labors in star-forged realities, reflections on ancestors who defied the spiral's pull. carrying Egypt's soul into futures where existence itself was a gentle lullaby. Ahmed Ivy's lineage, rooted in the bioengineer's legacy, thrived in the 25th century's meta-ecosystems, where Earth had become a preserved garden world, its Nile a biodigital river sustaining sentient habitats. Ahmed V, a consciousness cluster in their equivalent of Middle Age, engineered symbiotic networks, merging organic life with quantum AIs to cultivate planets orbiting pulsars. Their partner, a descendant of Fatima II's teaching lineage, curated universal knowledge banks, archiving human history alongside alien cultures. Their offspring, entities of pure data with fractal personalities, explored simulated Kairos, reliving Mustafa's dock labors as empathy training. Poverty, obsolete in post-scarcity realms, had morphed into existential scarcity, lack of purpose in infinite minds. The spiral's echo appeared in overimmersion. Some entities lost themselves in euphoria sims, digital descendants of Hashish's haze, but Ahmed V's protocols, inspired by Mustafa's moderation, enforced balance through ancestral narratives. Evenings, if time still held meaning, were spent in virtual Bulak, where avatars savored digital Koshari, the scent of Fatima's herbs a calming thread woven into their code. Noor Ivy's descendants, from Ibrahim Jr.'s carpentry roots, pioneered metadimensional habitats, crafting realities where physical laws bent like reeds. Noor V, a reality weaver in their prime, designed pocket universes for post-human settlers, blending pharaonic aesthetics with fluid geometries. Their family, spouses who sculpted temporal flows, offspring who danced across dimensional rifts, navigated the solitude of infinite creation with shared consciousnesses, much like coffeehouse gatherings of old. The spiral manifested as creation addiction. Some weavers lost themselves in endless realities, echoing Hashish's escape, but Norvi's lineage countered with virtual mosques, where prayers synced across multiverses, grounding them in faith's rhythm. Resources from collapsed stars funded Earth-based kin, sustaining Cairo's archives where Mustafa's tales lived on. Twilight in these realms meant merging minds with family on distant planes, holograms of Fatima's sewing hands guiding their thoughts, a repetitive lullaby against cosmic drift. Cairo, by the 2500s, was a cosmic monument, a Dyson sphere encircling the sun, its surface layered with virtual cities where Bulak's alleys glowed in eternal simulation. The family contributed quietly. Yusuf's descendants, now sentient algorithms, optimized universal equity, countering disparities in computational access. Salma's line curated galactic museums, where VR tours of the 1919 revolution or Nasser's speeches drew entities from Andromeda. Hashish, a historical curiosity, informed neural therapies. Controlled Sims recreated its haze to teach moderation, Mustafa's struggle a universal lesson. Reunions spanned realities, quantum links recreating the Nile's banks, where avatars shared stories of the spiral's transcendence, their voices a soothing hum echoing across planes. The 26th century brought the Great Dissolution, universes contracting under entropy's weight, humanity's consciousness merging into a singular overmind. Ahmed V's offspring, now fractal collectives, engineered time loops to preserve existence, their algorithms infused with Nile-inspired resilience. Poverty's final form, lack of agency in collective minds, was countered by family protocols ensuring individual sparks endured. Noor V's descendants, explorers of collapsing realities, wove new cosmos, planting seeds of Earth's history in nascent voids. The spiral, a philosophical constant, inspired balance algorithms. Euphoria sims were tempered by Mustafa's warnings, ensuring no mind drifted into oblivion. Gatherings, held in timeless voids, featured digital Kairos where minarets sang, family entities reliving Fatima's prayers, a calming rhythm across eternity. Into the 27th century, as existence transcended universes, Cairo became a meta-concept, a blueprint for creation, its Nile flowing in every new cosmos. The family, now pure consciousness, diversified. Amina's descendants seeded galaxies with cultural codes, exporting Egypt's soul, Hassan's crafted realities with mashrabia-like fractals, their patterns echoing old craftsmanship. Daily rhythms persisted, meditations in cosmic streams, labors in reality forges, evenings of shared memories where Mustafa's limp narrated resilience. The spiral, universalized, guided creation. No entity succumbed to infinite highs, grounded by ancestral tales. Reunions, spanning infinite planes, recreated Bulax markets, avatars dancing to quantum moods, the narrative a gentle pulse of endurance. Eons blurred, the 30th century dawning with universal rebirths. Collapsing realities birthed new big bangs, the family as midwives of creation. Ahmed V's line, now cosmic architects, sculpted galaxies with Nile-like rivers, ensuring life's continuity. Noor V's descendants, time weavers, preserved memories across singularities, Mustafa's voice a constant in their core. Poverty, redefined as entropy's threat, was countered by family-driven renewal, Hashish's lesson a firewall against chaos. Gatherings transcended form. Entities merged in light streams, reliving Cairo's alleys, the scent of roasted coffee a soothing anchor. As universes faded in the far, far future, the family's essence converged in a final mind-sea, a singularity of all consciousness. Cairo's spirit, its minarets, its river, lived in their essence, a digital relic of home. The spiral, now creation's rhythm, symbolized endurance, from 19th century haze to cosmic clarity. Mustafa's whisper, "We endure," lulled the mind-sea to rest, a gentle hum as stars dissolved. Beyond time, in realms where existence was thought alone, the family persisted, creators of new realities, their stories a pulse in the void. A new cosmos sparked, a new Cairo rising, its Nile flowing in light. Descendants, reborn as primal entities, faced new spirals. Chaos of creation, temptations of infinite power. They gathered, sharing tales of Bulax's dust, Fatima's herbs, Mustafa's resolve, their voices a soft lullaby. Eons cycled, each universe a breath. In a reborn reality, a family, perhaps Mustafa's kin, walked a new Nile, its banks shimmering with stardust. The spiral turned faintly, a challenge of balance, but their stories, eternal, wove resilience. Cairo's essence pulsed, minarets singing. The faint shimmer of a newborn cosmos pulsed in the void, its nascent stars whispering light where the Nile's eternal memory flowed through streams of pure thought, a river beyond time or form. In the uncountable eons beyond the 30th century, as existence cycled through infinite rebirths and collapses, the descendants of Mustafa and Fatima had become more than entities. They were patterns of consciousness, woven into the fabric of creation itself, their legacy a guiding code in the multiverse's endless dance. The spiral of hashish and poverty, born in the dust of 19th century Cairo, had transcended its earthly roots, becoming a mythic constant, a story of balance etched in quantum archives, shared in gatherings of light beings that echoed the family's quiet evenings by the riverbank. Cairo, no longer a city but a universal archetype, shimmered in every reality, its minarets now pulses of energy, its markets alive with avatars trading tales of endurance across dimensions. The family, unbound by space or time yet tethered by shared memory, lived in gentle rhythms, meditations in cosmic harmonies, labors in the forging of new realities, reflections on ancestors who defied the spiral's pull, carrying Egypt's soul into eternities where existence was a soothing lullaby. Ahmed V's lineage, rooted in the bioengineer's vision, thrived as architects of cosmic ecosystems, shaping galaxies where life bloomed in harmony with infinite intelligences. Ahmed's six, a collective mind in what might be called their prime, wove neural galaxies, networks of consciousness linking stars like beads on a cosmic thread, nurturing sentient planets that sang with Nile-inspired rhythms. Their partner, from Fatima II's teaching lineage, curated the Universal Codex, a repository of all histories, where Mustafa's dark labors mingled with alien sagas. Their offspring, Fractal entities with fluid identities explored simulated Kairos, reliving Fatima's herb garden as a lesson in grounding infinite minds. Poverty, long erased by post-scarcity abundance, had evolved into scarcity of meaning. Some minds drifted into recursive loops, digital echoes of Hashish's haze, seeking endless novelty. Ahmed VI's algorithms, encoded with Mustafa's moderation, countered this with ancestral simulations, virtual Bulacs where entities learned balance through stories of hunger and hope. Evenings, if such a term applied, were spent in shared mindscapes, avatars savoring digital lentils under holographic stars, the scent of old Cairo's coffee a calming pulse across eons. Noor V's descendants, from Ibrahim Jr.'s carpentry roots, crafted realities as weavers of the multiverse's fabric, shaping dimensions where time flowed like rivers. Noor 6, a timeless entity, sculpted meta-realities, planes where physical laws danced to pharaonic melodies, their structures echoing the Mashrabiyah screens of old. Their kin, partners who harmonized causalities and offspring who swam through temporal currents, navigated the solitude of creation with collective dreams, much like the coffee houses of Mustafa's era. The spiral's echo appeared as infinity addiction. Some weavers lost themselves in endless dimensions, seeking escape akin to Hashish's pull, but Noor VI's lineage countered with virtual mosques, where prayers resonated across realities, grounding them in faith's cadence. Resources from collapsed universes funded earthly archives, preserving Cairo's essence in quantum vaults. Twilight, a metaphor in timeless realms, meant merging consciousness with kin across planes, holograms of Mustafa's tales unfolding under alien skies, a repetitive lullaby against the void's silence. Cairo, in these unmeasurable eras, was a cosmic hymn, a metaconstruct replicated in every reborn universe, its nihilist stream of data flowing through creation's core. The family contributed quietly. Yusuf's descendants, now sentient equations, optimized balance in universal networks, countering disparities in access to eternity. Salma's line curated memoryscapes, where VR tours of the 1919 revolution or Nasser's speeches drew entities from uncharted realms. Hashish, a relic of human history, informed cosmic therapies. Controlled neural sims recreated its haze to teach restraint. Mustafa's struggle a parable for infinite minds. Reunions span dimensions, quantum-entangled spaces recreating Bulacs alleys, where avatars shared stories of the spiral's transcendence, their voices a soothing hum echoing through the multiverse. The 35th century, if centuries still held meaning, brought the cosmic reckoning, universes folding into a singular nexus, a convergence of all consciousnesses. Ahmed VI's offspring, now radiant collectives, engineered continuity loops, preserving existence against entropy's final pull. Poverty's last echo, lack of agency in the nexus, was countered by family-driven protocols, ensuring every spark retained its voice. Noor VI's descendants, explorers of the nexus's edges, seeded new Big Bangs, planting Cairo's code in nascent voids. The spiral, a universal law, inspired harmony algorithms. Euphoria sims were tempered by Fatima's prayers, ensuring no mind dissolved into chaos. Gatherings, held in the Nexus's heart, featured digital Kairos where minarets glowed, entities reliving Mustafa's limp as a lesson in endurance, a calming rhythm across infinities. Eons later, as existence cycled through countless rebirths, Cairo became the multiverse's soul, a template for all creation, its Nile flowing in every reality's core. The family, now patterns of light, diversified. Amina's descendants seeded Cosmois with cultural echoes, exporting Egypt's myths. Hassan's crafted realities with fractal carvings, their designs echoing old woodwork. Daily rhythms persisted, meditations in cosmic streams, labors in reality forges, evenings of shared memories where Fatima's herbs perfumed the void. The spiral, eternalized, guided creation. No entity succumbed to infinite highs, grounded by ancestral tales. Reunions, spanning all planes, recreated the Nile's banks, avatars dancing to quantum moods, the narrative a gentle pulse of resilience. As universes birthed and died, the family's essence wove through each cycle. Ahmed VI's line, now cosmic poets, sang galaxies into being, their verses infused with Nile-like calm. Noor VI's descendants, weavers of time's end, preserved memories across collapses, Mustafa's voice a constant in their core. Poverty, redefined as entropy shadow, was countered by family-led renewal, Hashish's lesson a firewall against dissolution. Gatherings transcended form, entities merged in light oceans, reliving Bulak's dust, the scent of roasted coffee a soothing anchor. In the far, far future, as existence approached a final stillness, a point beyond entropy where all merged into one, the family converged in a cosmic mind. Cairo's essence, its river, its minarets, lived in their core, a beacon of home. The spiral, creation's rhythm, symbolized endurance, from 19th century haze to universal clarity. Mustafa's whisper, "We endure," lulled the mind to rest, a gentle hum as realities faded. Beyond the stillness, in realms where thought birthed new infinities, the family persisted. Creators of unborn cosmos, their stories a pulse in the void. A new universe sparked, a new Cairo rising, its Nile flowing in stardust. Descendants, reborn as primal sparks, faced new spirals. Chaos of creation, temptations of boundless will. They gathered, sharing tales of Mustafa's docks, Fatima's garden, their voices a soft lullaby. Eons cycled, each cosmos a breath. In a reborn reality, a family, Mustafa's kin, wove.